Okay, well, I did it. I'm here at the camping area at the South Pole. They got a little sign there. It says the world's southernmost resort. It basically is just an area with a lot of, I mean, all there is snow around here anyway, but just an area here by the South Pole. The South Pole station's a little ways away. I'll charge the batteries a bit and go and do some filming out in the cold out there. It's very cold. Hannah from ALE gave me a bunch of treats yesterday. It was great, chocolate bars and stuff, and one of the things she gave me was a bottle of Coke, and when she gave it to me it was frozen, and so I brought it in, thawed it out, and then I actually took and had a pot of boiling water and stuck it in that and got it kind of warm. And then before I headed out, I took my Canada Goose parka, and I stuffed the Coke into the middle of that, and then put it in a stuff bag so it would stay liquid while I biked, and then I could have it towards the end when I needed a little bit of a boost. And so I got it out of the parka when I was ready to drink it, and when I pulled it out, it was still nice and warm and everything. And I pulled it out, and in the time it took me to unscrew the lid to the bottle of Coke, it froze. It is just so cold out there. My boots today, I'm having a hard time. I can't get the liners. The boots have a liner in them that usually I pull out at night to get them to dry out and everything. And the one liner I finally got to come out. The other one is frozen into the boot. I guess the sweat from my feet, enough moisture or whatever, got ice in there, and it froze the liner into the boot. My feet, when I took them out, got them out, and pulled off my socks, my toes were all purple from being cold. I didn't realize. I mean, I knew they were kind of cold, but I didn't realize they'd gotten that cold. But they had. My fingers are all numb, but because of the cold. But it turns out I made it. The first bike expedition to the South Pole. A pretty cool thing to be able to have come my way. It is really kind of a gift that was given to me. There were other people that had tried in the past to bike to the South Pole. Last year, Eric Larson tried to bike to the South Pole, but turned around about a quarter of the way, from what I understand, mostly personal reasons. So that was the first, I think the first real attempt to bike to the South Pole. And then this year, there were several expeditions. There was a lady from Australia that said she was going to bike to the South Pole, and actually the first one that announced that they were going to try to do it this year was me. And I said I was going to. My original plan was to have two ski-doos go with two snowmobiles. The people here call them ski-doos, which brand name, but two snowmobiles, and go with us and have them carry all our gear, and then we would just bike. If I were to ever do it again, which I highly doubt will ever happen, I would definitely do it with somebody else carrying my gear. But it's expensive, and I didn't get the money to do that, and it sounded like more of an adventure to do it carrying all your gear and food and stuff anyway. So kind of in some ways it's good I did that, because now I've got the real expedition, whereas the other way, would have been a lot more fun, a lot more doable, and a lot easier, but not quite as real, I guess. And then after I announced, there was a lady from Australia that said she was going to do it, and she was going to use snowmobiles, and had some other details to her plans that in the end she didn't raise the money needed to be able to do that, and so she canceled. And then there was after that Juan Menendez Granados, I think is the right way to say his name, I'm not sure, and he said he was going to do it, and he actually did. He's here in Antarctica. He arrived here at the South Pole a few days ago, so ahead of me. So there's, I think, a little bit of controversy that he's the first person, but his bike spent probably about 80% of the time on top of a sled being pulled while he skied, and so he chose to make his expedition. I mean, basically, if you it's like if you drove across the country with the bike on the back of your RV, that doesn't really count as biking across the country, and to some extent that's what he did. He did an awesome expedition from the same starting location as I started from, and finished here at the South Pole before me. I think he did it without any resupplies, which is a huge accomplishment, a great deal, but it was really a ski expedition with some biking in it. So he chose to make his expedition more of a ski expedition than a biking expedition, and then that left me as the only other person trying to bike to the South Pole. There's actually a lady, I don't know where she is from, that back in December. So she left in December and rode a tricycle to the South Pole. But her expedition, a tricycle versus a bicycle is, I mean, it's not a bicycle, but and as far as trying to travel in Antarctica, that's a whole different thing than a trike rather than a bike. And what she did is she got her trike started at 85 degrees, which is half the distance that we went on our expeditions. She went on the U.S. highway. The U.S. maintains a highway that goes from their station at McMurdo to here at the South Pole, and they've filled in all the crevasses and marked it and made it as good of a road as you can have here in Antarctica. It does get snow drifts across and stuff, but eliminates a lot of the real parts of an expedition. She was on a road on a trike. I actually ran into so on the way back, instead of taking the road back to their start point. They drove they had an Arctic truck that was supporting her, and they drove that back down to Union Glacier, which is where our base camp is. And so I crossed their path at Thiel's Corner, which is at 85 degrees, the halfway mark, and I talked to the driver of the Arctic truck, and basically her trike did quite well with the conditions, as long as there was no snow drifts across the road, at which point she had troubles. But she also her original plan was to do it carrying all her gear and stuff, but she couldn't do it, so had the Arctic truck carry all her gear, and she was doing, from what I understand, about a half to 3/4 of a degree a day, and that I guess a good cycling event, but not really an expedition, and half the distance on a U.S. maintained highway with a truck carrying all our gear, and a pretty well maintained road. So that just kind of everybody else chose things that. So on the other thing on that, when I talked to the driver and stuff, she was in her tent sleeping. So when I talked to the driver and about how everything went and everything, from what I can tell, there's absolutely no way her trike would have handled the real expedition. Climbing out from Hercules Inlet up, we climbed up to Patriot Hills area, and at Patriot Hills area there's actually a route that Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, ALE, that they use to carry fuel out to a skiway, so like a runway for airplanes, but for ski planes. They drag fuel out to that halfway point to be able to refuel their planes as they fly to and from the South Pole. So it gives them a resupply area, and so there's been some vehicle traffic through there pulling fuel, and so once up from Patriot Hills, got onto that, but it was well drifted over, really soft in some areas, not great biking, but there was some spots that were really good. Early on, as we were calling into ALE to report how we were doing, I would, as I talked to them, and say, there was a lot of good riding today, or the riding was hard today, because I rode my bike every day. I rode everywhere I could, and there were times I had to hike a bike, so I did push the bike where I had to, but I rode on the bike every day, and as much as possible, and there would be lots of areas that were rideable, and I could see Juan's ski tracks, and as I'd call in my reports to ALE, and say, when's Juan gonna start biking? And they, it looks like he's going to be the first person to ski to the South Pole with a bike on his sled. But there are good spots to ride. But the thing is when you're biking, you can't really wear skis, and so you could see a lot of areas. It's like it's bikeable, but if he takes and switches from skis to bikes, takes a gear change, boots and everything, and get ready to do it. And so you can't just jump on your bike with your skis on. And so even though there would be areas that were bikeable, there are a lot of areas that still required hike-a-bike. And so he'd ski, and I think just the inconvenience of switching back and forth would make that just not a doable thing. So he wasn't biking at all for about a quarter of the way, it seems. I'd have to go back through my records, but he didn't bike much for the first quarter, if at all. And then so we're following along this road, and it's getting better and better as we get closer to Thiel's Corner. And by the time we got a few miles, not a few miles, a few days, 3 or 4 days to Thiel's Corner, it started to get to the last 3 or 4 days to Thiel's Corner were bikeable all day. You could ride and ride and ride, and it was a lot of hard work riding, but it was all rideable, and so that's when I started doing my best mileage, and to Thiel's Corner. And when it got to Thiel's Corner, so at that point, Juan started a routine of trying to bike. The first day he tried to bike, he went less than 1/10 of a mile before he switched back to skis. Another day he got in a mile or so, and eventually built up to the last 2 days before Thiel's Corner. He was doing about 4 miles, 3 to 5 miles in a day that he would bike, and the rest of it would be skiing. So doing 15 miles or more. 15. At that point, I was doing 18 to 20, 24 miles. I think is the most I did in a day. And so he wasn't doing as many miles as I was, but and I was gaining on him a little bit. But I was doing that mostly by bike, whereas he would get 3 to 5 miles on his bike, and the rest of it was ski. And then at Thiel's Corner, I was worried that now we're past where where they had pulled fuel to, so there was no more road, and it was going to be on our own and be hard. But it turns out that the Arctic truck, that there were like three or four trucks that had come. One that had gone to the South Pole and come back, and then a couple that I don't know how they got to the South Pole, if they rode up to the South Pole and came back on the same route or whatever. But anyway, there were vehicle traffic that continued from Thiel's Corner up to the South Pole, and one of the trucks had a breakdown on biking. It was a little more, I think it was, I can't remember exactly, a day-ish, or maybe a day and a half travel from Thiel's Corner out, that they had gone out and rescued this truck and pulled it back on a sled. So it actually made a pretty nice surface to bike on. Biked on that to that point, and that was actually some the interesting thing is after a vehicle travels on the snow for pretty close to about a day, it takes about a day after the vehicle travels on the snow for the snow to harden back up. And so right after it travels on the snow, it flattens everything out, but it's so soft it doesn't make good conditions for biking. But after about a day, it becomes hard and bikeable, but there's always wind, and the wind would blow snowdrifts across and fill in the ruts from the vehicles, and those ruts, the snow that would fill in would be really soft, and so it's kind of a mix of good and bad to follow in the tracks of the truck, but it would generally was better than just going out in the fresh, untouched snow. I did travel some in the untouched snow, but for the most part I traveled in the tracks from the trucks, and followed that track up until I got to it was working really well, and skiing biking most of the time. Juan was still skiing most of the time, but he would bike again probably at the most 5 miles, but usually less than that, and some days not at all, and continued on up until somewhere in that 87 degrees south, or somewhere in that area, 86, basically 86 to 88 degrees. There gets to be a lot of sastrugi, which are some people. Before I came, I'd kind of heard the description of the sastrugi was kind of like snowdrifts, but it's not really snowdrifts. The wind blows and it carves out the ice, and so it's more that it's eroded away the ice, and you'll get these it'll come and go down and back up, and really rough, and it makes these troughs and some really cool formations as far as looking at, but really nasty to bike through, and the truck traffic going through that would navigate through, and I mean they're huge, and so there's no way the trucks could drive over a lot of it, and so they'd have to pick and choose their way through them, and so it eased up the way because the trucks had smashed through them. But after by the time I was biking through there, the trucks had been a week or two since the trucks had gone through, and so the sastrugi would be cut across the truck tracks, and so it was actually at times quite fun, very technical riding and stuff. But the other thing that happens a lot is when it gets cloudy, and it got cloudy a lot. There were sunny days and there were cloudy days, and on the cloudy days, you lose all the shadows, and when you lose all the shadows, everything's white. It's all snow. It's all white, and so all the shadows disappear. You cannot see what's what. You can't tell what's up. You can't tell what's down. If you look right down underneath the wheels, you can barely tell any contour at all in the snow, and so you'd be going along and biking through the sastrugi was when in the whiteout conditions was very difficult. You'd be going along, and all of a sudden just drops out on you from where the wind had carved it out, and so you drop into that, and a lot of times it dropped down and back up just enough a distance that it would grab that front wheel, and if you weren't careful, the bike would flip over the handlebars on that. I actually I don't think I ever. Well, no, I did. I think I went over the handlebars once, but usually I wouldn't get into those. I had some where I'd be biking along, and there'd be a drop off to one side, and I'd be going along and in the whiteout conditions, and I couldn't see that was the case until I'm right into it, and I fell off of some of those. At a certain point, I decided I really need to, in order for my safety, and if I break the bike or break me on one of those, then the expedition ends, and so I need to walk through those. But usually I'd end up, because of the whiteout conditions, I was ending up in the middle of it before I knew it was there, and crashed a few times. Yeah, I guess kind of backtrack a little bit. The other hazard I hit early on there, I stepped into a crevasse. It was about 2 days or so into the expedition. There was a going through, and it was in a place I had to push the bike, and as I was pushing, and my right leg disappeared into this crevasse. I fell in up to my waist, well, up to my thigh with the one leg. The other leg hadn't stepped on the crevasse yet, but and the bike was at least. I don't know. It was kind of across the area where I stepped in. I don't know how wide the crevasse was or anything. I know it was wide enough to fall into my hip with. My foot fell in. I don't know if it was wide enough for the full body to fall in or not, because my bike didn't break through, and so using my bike, I pulled my one leg back out and quickly got to the other side of that and out and away from there. And I tried to go back to and get a picture, but I didn't dare get close enough to get a good picture. But the interesting thing was that all the ski expeditions, except at that point Juan hadn't gone past there yet, but all the other ski expeditions that were going from Hercules Inlet had already crossed right over the top of that same crevasse. You could see all the ski tracks, and they had all skied right over it and didn't even know it was there. Richard Park had I met him just in probably less than an hour before I fell into that, and he had just barely skied over that same spot on his way back to Hercules Inlet, and so it was one of those things that if you were on skis, you could cross that and you'd never know it was there. And since I was the only one biking at that point, I think I'm the only one that fell into it. And so I fell into the crevasse, and but not severely, and made it out of that. So after the crevasse, all the way back up to biking through the Sastrugi. The Sastrugi were when it was good lighting and you could see, were very technical and very hard, but it somewhere before the Sastrugi got really bad, I broke my the free hub, which is the part in the rear hub that makes it so that when you stop pedaling, the wheel can spin without your pedals spinning. And one of the things that they told me to do, as stuff I'd read, and as I talked to people, they say you've got to change the grease in the free hub and in your bearings and everything. And so I had cleaned out the grease that came with the wheel originally, and put in this grease that was supposed to be good to the minus 40 degree temperatures. Turned out to be a bad idea. It messed up the springs. It made it so they didn't, the pawls that ratchet the free wheel make it so that when you pedal forward you get the power transfer to the wheel, but when you quit pedaling that you can coast, and those pawls weren't engaging properly because I think because of the grease that I put in there, because right after I had re-greased the wheel and we were riding the bike around, every once in a while it would crunch. You'd pedal and you'd hear this and I didn't know what it was that was making that noise. I kind of thought it was the chain in the gears, but I didn't realize what it was. But it turned out that it was the pawls in there not catching properly, and it chewed up the inside of the free wheel. And so the free wheel, because of my the free hub, because of my preparation before I left, I messed it up and ended up breaking on me. And so then when it first went bad, it just kind of seized up to where I could still pedal, but you couldn't stop pedaling. Anytime you stopped pedaling, the gears would keep turning, and so it would wrap the chain up all weird if you ever stopped pedaling. And so I had to pedal constantly, which isn't too bad because it's uphill in the snow, and so it was there's no coasting anyway. But being able to have that free wheel action makes it so you can get the pedals in the right spot to start. It makes it so when you stop, there's always a little bit of a coast before you stop, and it makes it so the chain doesn't wrap up on that. And the big thing it did technically is, since you couldn't stop pedaling when you'd go up over a sausage and then drops way down, and drop sometimes at a 90 degree angle down, but then usually a little bit of a ramp down, so it'd always be rideable. At least the ones that went through. If it wasn't rideable, I stopped and walked it through. But it turned out that because I couldn't stop pedaling, that meant I can't reposition. You can't put yourself on the bike and get your weight back. And so then biking through the Sasaki with no free hub, not being able to coast, it was hard to get back behind the seat. And so as I'd go down, it was really hard to hit the bottoms of those and where it comes back up without going over the handlebars. But I managed to do it quite successfully. And then things got worse. It was just slowly chewing up the free hub in there, and the hub was getting all chewed up internally, and it eventually got to where you'd pedal the bike and it wouldn't transfer the power to the wheel, and so I couldn't pedal anymore, and so at that point I took some derailleur. I brought some extra derailleur cable just in case, and I took that and kind of wrapped it in and around through the spokes and the gears, and made it so that as I pedaled, that wire would pull on the spokes, so then I could pedal again. At that point, made it so I couldn't coast, but I was able to keep going. But the problem was I had just kind of randomly wove the wire in through the spokes and the gears to get it all tied together. And as I was biking, it would tighten up more on one side than the other, and it got to where my shifting, the chain would jump from gear to gear or off the gears and into the spokes, and I'd have to readjust things, and I dealt with that for quite a while till finally it got to where the chain would drop off on the one side and drop into the spokes on the one side and drop down to gear on the other side as the wheel would go around, and I couldn't go anymore, and so I got in, brought it in the tent, and opened and took the wire out and pulled the hub apart, and at that point all the bearings and stuff in the free hub were destroyed from that going around and having that uneven tension on stuff. And I think I broke one spoke at that point, so I had a broken spoke, and the hub was just destroyed, and I thought I can't bike anymore, and I thought basically it was a dead expedition, and then I took it all and put it back together, and I had some tie wire for like fence baling wire type stuff, but it was kind of a lightweight wire. I chose the wrong wire to take with me. It was a lightweight wire, but I took and wrapped that around and did a little better job of putting it on, put it together, and I didn't think it was going to work, because it was so destroyed internally, and it turned out that it did work, and I continued going for a day or two with that, but eventually the wire I had wasn't strong enough, and it broke all the wires, and I was again back to where I'd pedal, and it wouldn't make the bike go forward. And so I again thought, well, now I'm done. And then I remembered I had a wire that I'd stuck in the hood of my jacket here, so that I could shape the hood the way I wanted to shape it. And so I pulled that wire out, and then the parka I have had a wire in it also, so I pulled the wire out of it, and then I remembered in the tent there's some windows on the ends of the tent, and it had wire in it. So I took the wire from the hoods of my parka and my jacket, and the wire from the window of my tents, and wired it all together again, and the wheel still has those wires in. I was really fortunate that Borealis decided to send me a new wheel, and I got that at the 3/4 way, and it was probably good to get that, because in the process of using that, all that extra weird tension on the spokes and the wires pulling on the spokes, I had broken another 2 spokes, so I broke 3 spokes on the way here. And so I got the new wheel, and it was made things so much better. I could start. I got so used to pushing the bike to the exact right, to where the pedals were in the right spot to get started, and it took a long time to as I'd start to not try to push the bike to the right spot to get the pedals, to realize I could just put the pedals where I want, and that was a real blessing. And the other thing was as I was dropping down the Sastrugi, now I could stop pedaling, get back behind the seat, and so it made navigating through that, it just made things so much better. I could there's actually a few places where I actually coasted just short distances as I come down off snow features and stuff, and I could do that without when I had the gears wired to the wheel. Anything going down like that short-lived or whatever, I'd always have to pedal really fast to keep the chain from getting all chewed up, but I didn't have to do that anymore, and so it made things so much better. I love my new wheel. And some alarm just went beep beep. Anyway, it ended up being pretty good, and it actually looks really cool too. They sent me a yellow wheel, and I have a red wheel on the front, yellow wheel on the back. That looks pretty cool. We'll get some pictures of that later. Continued on, following in those truck tracks until somewhere close to I think it was about 88 degrees or so. It was within somewhere between 88 and 89 degrees. It got one of those cloudy days where you couldn't see, and so it was really hard to follow the vehicle tracks. I'd lose them all the time and search for them and re-find them. And so I came out of that on a vehicle track that I don't know where it was headed, if it came here to the pole using a different route or what, but as I was following it, it got to where I was 6 miles off route of where I was supposed to be. And when I called into ALE that night and told them what I was doing, they said, "Oh, don't be careful following those truck tracks because they don't all head to the South Pole." And so I decided I better recalculate my route and start heading towards the pole. And so I did that, and I traveled a couple days towards the pole. And at that point, when I'd gotten my resupply at the halfway point, since there's their skiway there, they let me send stuff back that I didn't want to take with me. So I sent back all the food except what I thought I would need to get to the 3/4 way spot, and I ended up calculating that out pretty well. I pretty much ran out of food, or got low on food, and ended up working out just perfect. And so when I got to the 3/4 way, I now had a whole bunch of food again, and fuel and stuff, and I started using the fuel to letting the stove burn for quite a while after I'd finished heating up water for food and drinking. I'd let the stove run because it would warm up the tent. Running the stove out in the vestibule, it warms up the outside, which it's kind of like a double tent. There's the tent I'm in, and then there's another tent on the outside of that, and so it warms up the outer layer, and then the sun and the heat on the outer layer warms up the inside. And so I used a lot of fuel to do that, and I went through the food as fast as I could because I didn't want all that extra weight, and tried to have just enough food left to make it to the South Pole. So I calculated out, and I figured I'd probably make it here about a week ago. Publicly, I was saying on last Saturday, but I thought I'd actually make it sooner than that. So I kind of worked it out so that my food supply would last till that Saturday, and then a few meals beyond that. And I figured that's all I needed. But the whiteout conditions. There was one day that I just got so frustrated I couldn't tell where I was going, and doing so bad, kept getting turned around and just not doing well. And so I just ended the day after a short ride and lost a day's worth of riding, which was a bad choice when I was getting lower and lower on food. So I did that, lost a day of riding, and used up an extra day worth of getting here, and so as I headed off on my own towards the South Pole, I was starting to get low on food, and so I would have a small meal for dinner and a small meal for breakfast. I had some freeze-dried fruit that I would eat while I was biking. But I was low on food. I made a dumb choice when I packed my bags for the resupplies. I put all my biking, the food to eat while I was biking, I put it all in the first with what I started with, and so I had a lot of heavy weight from that, and so the first half of the expedition, I was eating that stuff as fast as I could to reduce the weight, and I didn't realize I hadn't put any in any of the resupplies, and so at halfway I'd run out of all my food that was intended to be eaten while I was biking. And so at that point, I was just had the freeze-dried fruit to eat while I was biking, and that sustained me for a while. But eventually, I ran out of the freeze-dried food too, and so all I had for nutrition was a meal in the morning and a meal at night, and it wasn't enough calories, and I was getting more and more drained as I did that. I also spent a couple nights biking instead of sleeping to try to make up for lost time to get the cache. The one cache they placed 4 miles off route in all these crevasse areas, so I had to go out and get the cache, and had to come back on the same route I went to get it. So it was a 8-mile detour that cost me half a day's worth of travel. It was I had to go through some pretty nasty sastrugi to get to it, and up a pretty big hill, and then come back the same way, and a lot of crevasse danger. I was actually scared that those could have been my last days as I was going up and getting it. There were a lot of small crevasses that I crossed over, and so I got that back, and I tried to make up for my lost time by biking through the night, and I just totally ran out of energy, and so I continued on with limited meals, but I wasn't getting very good mileage, and with no tracks from vehicles anymore, the snow was just it was hard to bike on it, and I had run out of food, and I was really low on fuel, and so when I called into ALE and said, I'm a day or a few days away from completely running out of food, they said, okay, if you run out of food, I still thought I might make it before I ran out of food, but they said, okay, if you run out of food, we can drop some off, have the plane drop some off, or send a snowmobile back with some food. And so yesterday, I used up the last of my, was it yesterday? 2 days ago, something. I used up the last of my food. It's kind of hard to decide what one day is and what one isn't now, because I switched when we started, I was on the Chilean time that ALE uses, and now at the South Pole they go off of New Zealand time, which is a different day and a different time, and so I don't even know what day today's. My watch says it's Tuesday night. I think it's New Zealand time. I think it's Wednesday. Anyway, so somewhere in the last 24 to 36 hours, Hannah from ALE came by with the Ski-Doo on a snowmobile and gave me a lot of food, and the bag and food weighed a lot and added a lot of weight to my expedition. But at that point, I decided it was better to eat the food as I needed and not waste anything. And so I carried a lot of weight and biked all through the night and till about noon Chilean time. I got to, before that, so a few hours before that, I was biking and the trail goes, no trail. Well, at this point I was following Hannah's route back. She'd snowmobiled out to me. So I called and told her where I was, and they said to call back the next morning and tell them where I was and my direction I was going. And so in the morning when I woke up, I thought, man, this just out on my own, without truck tracks is just the biking's just too difficult, especially with how worn out I am. And I thought if I get back on the route I'm supposed to be on, there's probably some vehicle tracks there, and I can get on those and bike better. So I decided to head west. It was about 3 miles to get back onto my original planned route, and so I did that. And so when Hannah came out to find me, she went to where I had been camped that night and found my tracks headed west, and oh no, what's he doing? And so when I got back to the route I was supposed to be on, it turned out there were no vehicle tracks there. There were no tracks at all on the route I was supposed to be on, and so it was a total waste of 3 miles going the wrong direction. And when she saw where I was going, she's, what's he doing? Because I going, you got the South Pole here. I'm going just, straight west and not advancing towards the South Pole at all for 3 miles. And so she followed that and then found me and gave me the food. And at that point, she headed back to the pole, and so I followed her track the rest of the way back to the pole. But it takes at least a good day for the tracks to harden up after a vehicle goes on them, and of course I was less than that behind her, and so her tracks weren't very firm. But I lowered the air pressure on my tire, and I was able to bike and sometimes I'd have to push and bike, and did that until I came up, and you'd be going along and it'd climb up to 9,100 feet and then drop back down to below 9,000 feet, and it'd go back and forth between that over and over and over and over. and just was a lot of work. And then finally, one of the times going up, it went up and up and up until where I got to 93, about 93.33 elevation, and I looked off and I could see a few little dots on the horizon, and it's like, is that some sastrugi? At this point, the sastrugi were pretty small to non-existent, and looking out there, it's like, it might be the South Pole Station. And a little while later, looking a little better, and it's like, that is, and then I realized I could see the South Pole, and it was the greatest thing ever. I couldn't believe how happy I was to finally be able to see the South Pole. It's the greatest thing I'd ever seen. All it was a few dots on the horizon, really. But I could tell it wasn't just Sastrugi. It was the South Pole Station, and so I called my wife, all overcome with joy, saying, I can see the South Pole, and all excited, and then I got going again, and all of a sudden it's like, man, what has happened? All of a sudden my sleds are just like impossible to pull, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I looked down at my rear wheel, and there my tire was pretty much off the rim. The tube had gone flat on me, and so I changed the flat and pumped up the tire. And it was a hard balance with the air pressure low enough. Then the tire can creep on the wheel, and originally I had the tire glued to the wheel, so that wasn't an issue. But since I changed the wheel, and I didn't bring any, there's no way I could have glued it out here anyway. It's so cold the glue wouldn't have worked, and so my wheel wasn't glued to the tire anymore, so it'd creep, and then the valve stem would get crooked, and so I'd straighten that out, and it's so cold the valve stem wouldn't close well, and so I was losing air, and so I lost air and got a flat. I don't know if the tube has a flat in it or if just it was leaking out of the valve or what, but I switched to a new tube, and then it's so cold, the tire to get the traction needed to travel on the soft snow. I could do it and I could travel, but I had to have the pressure really low in the tire, and so then of course when the tire's where it's contacting the snow, it flattens out and you get traction, and normally then when it rotates around, it would go back to normal shape and go through the bike, but it was gotten so cold that it would flatten out, and the tire would stay that shape, and so it started rubbing against the frame, and so I'd have to put more air in the tire so it wouldn't flatten out so much. But if I put enough air in the tire so that it wouldn't flatten out enough, so it would stay round enough that it would fit through the bike frame, then I didn't have enough traction to pedal a lot of times. If I went low enough that I could get the traction, then the tire would rub against the frame, and so I made it really difficult. And I kind of playing with that balance of trying to get that right air pressure to where I could get enough traction, but the wheel would still spin on the bike, and I at a certain point I decided I had to keep the pressure high enough. I couldn't risk. I had it had gotten so cold, and trying to keep my hands warm. It was really hard keeping my hands warm. And so I had I had 2 spare tubes, and I took one of the tubes and I cut it apart and made a cover to go over the top of my gloves. And so I only had 1 spare tube, and so I didn't want to lose that last spare tube. And one of my goals was to never put my bike on the sled, and if I lost the tube and the back wheel wouldn't spin, then that would kill my goal of having it be that the wheels travel the whole distance from the pole, from the coast to the pole. And so I didn't want to risk losing my tire, so I ended up mostly walking at that point. I'd bike when I could, but a lot of walking from there, pushing the bike until I got to the South Pole station here. And then I figured from there I could take the risk of losing my tube. It was only a couple miles left, and so I lowered the pressure to where I got enough traction. I figured it would be easier to bike from. There's kind of a corridor you have to use to enter into the South Pole area, into this area near the station here. And I figured there's been snowmobiles back and forth through there, and skiers and stuff. And I figured it packed down good enough I could ride on that. But I still had to lower the pressure because the snowmobiles and tracks and stuff. It's so cold here. It's just so bitter cold here. I don't know what the temperature is, but it is cold. You have to. I've got a face mask on that protects my face from the wind and everything. The other thing it turns out that it does is I'm breathing in a little bit of warmer air there because it's kind of protected, and I've got a little bit of warmth there. But if you breathe in too hard and pull in too much cold air, you get that cold air in your lungs. It hurts, and so it's very, very cold here, and within the last I don't know 20 miles or so at least, the snow doesn't harden up like it does everywhere else. It's so cold it doesn't harden, and so I never get the hardness that I've had everywhere else. And so you'd have to run that really low pressure. And so coming in on the station where the snowmobiles had gone was really rough and packed, but pulling the sleds on it was hard. And so if I moved over, there were some old ski tracks. If I got onto those, that worked a little better. And I came in here into the station and area and dropped my sleds off here at the camping area and took a quick ride down to the pole, touched the South Pole. They've got a pole in the ground that marks where the South Pole is. They've actually got 2 of them, one that's kind of a photo op area, and the other one that's where the actual geographic South Pole is. And so I I biked past the ceremonial one and went to the actual South Pole and touched the pole, so to say, hey, I am now at the South Pole. And so I did that, and then came back, set up my tent, and then here pretty soon I'm gonna go and get ready and go out. I've got some things that are cached away here somewhere. Go find those. Some clean clothes, and I made it to the South Pole, the first bike expedition to the South Pole, and it's just one of those things that not that I earned it or I was some great whatever. It's just I happened to be able to take advantage of the opportunity to do this, and the other people that could have done it before me did other things. So didn't get the Eric turned around. Juan decided to bike. The Australian lady, I should remember, Kate, decided to didn't get the money, so she didn't come, and so and then I don't know the name of the lady that did it on the trike, but nobody took it before me. If Juan had decided to bike instead of ski the whole way, he probably would have beat me. He's half my age. I turned 50 while I was on the expedition, so he's stronger, younger, and more experienced. He's crossed Greenland. He crossed Greenland with ski and bike, and when I was at Union Glacier, I talked to him about it, and he says, yeah, he doesn't say he biked across Greenland because the conditions weren't good, and so he really skied across it, and he told me, yeah, he wouldn't say he did something that he didn't really do, and so I'm hoping he is true to his word and doesn't claim that he biked to the South Pole, because I kept track of his biking for quite a while. Up until just I think it was a little bit before the halfway point. He had a total of 4 miles out of the first, pretty close to the half, and then by the halfway he'd done those other 3 or 4 mile a day thing, so he had less than 20 miles in the first half, and then in the second half I didn't. There are times in the whiteout when I couldn't see if he was biking or not, and then this last half a degree, I don't know if he biked any of that or not, because we didn't follow the same route for this last half a degree. But even if he did the last half degree, that's 30 miles plus the other stuff. There's no way he did 100 miles in the second half, and so if I say he did 120, and this is nautical miles, if you be generous, convert that to statutory miles, normal miles, and give him a generous leeway. He's biked less than 170 miles out of the 700 and pretty close to 750 miles. So if he's true to his word that he told me at Union Glacier that he wouldn't claim to do something that he didn't do, then he won't claim to have biked to the South Pole. But it's kind of hard. I get reports of what's going on outside, and I don't know what he's saying and what just other people are saying or what, but there apparently some controversy of whether or not he biked to the South Pole. But if he's true to his word and an honest person, he'll admit that he didn't bike to the South Pole. So he opened up that opportunity for me to be the first person to bike the South Pole. I arrived here at the South Pole. The sad thing is they've got kind of a campground here, and ALE sets up a little thing here and everything. they cleaned up and took down camp, and everything's gone. And so I'm here all by myself. There's the South Pole Station, and there's people there and everything, but I'm not supposed to bug them. Eventually, I think they'll set up a time for me to come and tour the station and stuff. But I arrive here, and after I was so emotionally overcome at when I first, it still gets me when I first saw the South Pole. So emotionally overcome at that point. I arrived here, and it's like, okay, I'm here, now what? And so it's kind of a little bit anticlimactic to arrive here and go down to the pole and stuff, and I'm here now, and so I'm here, and there's nobody here to greet me. I'm just here on my own. Apparently there's another expedition that's another person that's gonna arrive in the next day or so, and then ALE will fly out and come pick us up and take us back. And so I'm pretty much done. When my big celebration and emotional, yay! I'm gonna make it was 13 miles away from the South Pole. When I arrived here, I was like, okay, I'm here. Now what? So it's kind of a weird thing that the actual arrival here was not. It just wasn't. It didn't affect me very much. It was just like, okay, now what? Whereas that 13 miles before I got here, I just totally broke down and lost it, because I was so happy that after almost 2 months of biking across Antarctica to the South Pole, I finally arrived. And I made it, and I still have all my fingers. I've got some cuts on my hands that I got from the wiring of my free hub, and they don't really, in the conditions here, they don't really heal very well. I've got a cut here I did just yesterday or so with my knife. My thumb has split a crack in the end of that, and it hasn't healed. All my fingertips are numb, and I don't know how much of that is from gripping the handlebars and how much of it's from the cold. My feet are a mess. I've got cracks in my feet. When I arrived here, I took my shoes off. My toes were all purple, but they seem to be okay. My feet, my toes are numb, and I don't know how much of that is from when I bike. When I bike all day, it makes my feet go numb anyway, and so I don't know how much of the numbness is from biking and how much of it's from the cold. I got frostbite on my face right here. Other than that, I'm in good shape. I think my fingertips, a lot of my fingers are numb anyway. This finger I cut when I was a kid. I cut the finger with a pocket knife, and so this finger is pretty much numb anyway. The nerves are dead in it. The rest of the fingers on this hand should be okay, but they're all numb on the end now. This hand, I cut the nerve here, so this finger's all numb anyway. This one had the end of my finger got cut off when I was a kid, and I held it on, and so the end of that finger was numb anyway. This finger should be normal, but it's numb on the end. My thumbs are numb on the end. I think some of it's cold damage, and some of it's gripping the handlebars. I'm hoping that they'll come back to normal doing that. The ends of my fingers, I think the other thing too is just the conditions and everything. The things, your fingers just don't, they don't get the kind of care. I don't know. They it's like that crack in my thumb. It just no matter what, it just stays there. And so when I try to use touch screens, the ends of my fingers don't work very well, and so I can touch the screen, and it doesn't sense the touch of my finger very well. And so hopefully that's all stuff that time will heal. I'm done. I made it. I can go home and go back to my family. I haven't seen my family since middle of November. Haven't seen the only people I've seen since middle of November are people that I basically didn't know before. So I had when I was in Chile, the flight from Chile to Antarctica was delayed because of bad weather, and my hotel room that I had reserved, the time I had in the room ran out, and it's the busy season, and so they said, yeah, we've got reservations for somebody else, you got to leave. And so I got a hold of the missionaries, and actually I found the bishop, and he didn't speak any English, and he called the missionaries, and with the missionaries talked to him, and asked them if they could help me find a place to stay, and the bishop offered to let me stay at his place, which was awesome. So I stayed with him for pretty much a week. Nice, humble family. Hope everything's good with them. When I left, their son Pablo had appendicitis, and he wouldn't let him give him shots, and so I don't know how Pablo's doing. I don't know how Bishop and their family's doing, but they were great to me. And then the ALE people, but pretty much I've been alone for since the beginning of December. I've been out here in Antarctica. I got within sight of Juan's tent a couple times. I talked to the driver. I talked to a few people at Thiel's Corner. I talked to some of the ALE people there, and the driver of that Arctic truck at Thiel's Corner. And then Hannah, basically yesterday, when she dropped off food, and those are the only people I've seen since the beginning of December, and it's now almost the end of January. Tomorrow or 2 days from now, depending on what time zone. Oh no, tomorrow, because my watch is on New Zealand. I mean on Chilean time. So tomorrow is my wife's birthday, and I've missed Thanksgiving. I missed my birthday, my anniversary, Christmas, New Year's, my son's birthday, and now tomorrow will be my wife's birthday, and so I've missed all of those family events while I've been gone. And it'll be great to get home back to the family and be able to give everyone a hug. And I'm not a hugger. But be able to be back with the family and try to figure out what I do with the rest of my life. When I was at, I think it was about 88.50. No, it's 87.50. I think about 87 degrees 50 minutes south, in a whiteout condition, and thinking about what to do with now that I've I hadn't finished at that point, but assuming I would finish, what I do with this. What do I do to use this expedition to help people, and how am I going to do that? My goal since I got laid off as a computer programmer has been to try to use biking to help people gain the health and fitness that I got. I thought I was going to die from high cholesterol, and in fact my mom died of a heart attack, basically because of high cholesterol. She died a little over a year ago, and I want to help people be able to have a long and healthy life, and to be able to fight heart disease and diabetes. I've always tried to help out with ever since I opened up my bike store, I've tried to help out with the Tour de Cure, and which is a biking event for the American Diabetes Association. So try to figure out how to use this to do that. I think biking is an excellent way. If you try to just exercise for exercise sake, it'll work for a while, but eventually most people exercising just to exercise, it's got to be something you enjoy. And so biking for me is that, and I'd like to develop that love of biking and biking skills in others, and just build a good biking community. Then I think that we can solve a lot of issues. We solve a lot of cholesterol issues. Good exercise program reduces cholesterol and reduces diabetes issues and overweight issues. So heart, diabetes and obesity problems. We've got an obesity epidemic in this country, and right now there's a lot of controversy and debate over the best way to make healthcare affordable in the United States, and I think that the best way to make healthcare affordable is to reduce. It's kind of a supply and demand thing. That there's lots of demand for healthcare because we're all getting obese and inactive. The world we live in just lots of nutrition available and not a lot of physical work required, and so it's just natural that we would become obese, and we need a good way to combat that. And so I think I can work on that with the biking, getting as many people on bikes as I can, and try to make it a lifelong thing. And then if you you improve the health, you reduce the demand for healthcare, you reduce a lot of need for a lot of different drugs. When you get into it's like on my expedition, I hardly ever go. I don't have a doctor. since I got laid off, I haven't had any health care, any insurance or anything like that, and so I don't have a doctor, I don't have anything like that, and so when I got here, it's like I had a first aid kit that I bought in Chile, and they're like, well, you need this and this and this, and it's like, yeah, and then they're going through, okay, so if you take this drug, then it's going to cause this problem, and then you'll need this drug, and so they gave me a list of drugs that would be good to have to take, but when I went to the pharmacy in Chile and asked them for that, it's like, you can't have that, you have to have a prescription for that. And so I got here and they're like, well, yeah, you're supposed to get that stuff get a prescription from your doctor, tell them you're going on an expedition and get prescriptions for these things before you come. And it's like, oh, I didn't have any of that, but it's one of those things, you take cholesterol medicine and that causes a problem here, and then you take medicine for that, and it all complicates each other, and yeah, I'm not saying you shouldn't take the things and get the health care and medical things you need, but if we are active and out and getting a good amount of exercise and healthy and having a fun doing it, we're going to reduce our need for those things, and if we do that, we're going to reduce the health care costs, and that I think that'll do more for health care costs than anything the insurance and whatever they're trying to do to make health care affordable. And then the other thing is, I think if we can make people lifelong bikers, where they can use a bike to get around. In some of the cases, a lot of times we travel by car in things that could easily be done by bike. If we can reduce the car traffic, we reduce pollution, we reduce our use of fossil fuels, we reduce our dependency on foreign oil, which that dependency on foreign oil causes wars. I just think that the more people we get on bike, we help a lot of the issues we face in these modern days. So that's the goal, is to improve the world through biking, and specifically work on fighting obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. And so I rambled on and on. Sorry, I cried a bit there at times, but I made it to the South Pole, and it was by far the hardest thing I've ever done. That first the first couple weeks, I was getting less than 10 miles a day. I'd work all day long, and it was more work than I could handle. I was just dying, killing myself every day, and with the low mileage I was getting, I figured there's no way I was ever going to finish this expedition. And I thought, well, I'll just go as far south as I can till I run out of time, and then be done. And then eventually, as I got to where conditions were better and I was able to ride better, less hike a bike and more biking and faster biking, I started doing 18, 20 miles, sometimes 24 miles a day, and it's like, I can maybe do this. And so, but this last couple weeks have been very hard again, and even up until until I woke up this morning, I had my doubts whether or not I was going to make it. I think that's why I was so overcome with joy when I finally could see the South Pole. It's like, I may actually make it. And then when I made it, it's like, yeah, okay, I made it. But for the last couple days, last week or so, there's been times I was seriously worried that I might have gone 2 months, over 600 miles, maybe even over 700 miles, and fell at the very end. And then I actually am not too far from having failed, because they closed up camp here yesterday. There's still a few days that you can arrive at camp after they close, but in a few days, the deadline, I'd have to be here. If I didn't make it here within a couple days, then it would have been over and I wouldn't have made it. So it was great to make it, and I'll talk again later.